All right. So good night, everyone, and welcome again to our Bible study. I am very excited to be here and to share with you from the Word of God. Tonight we'll be doing a little review. I'll go through it as quickly as I possibly can to refresh your memory. And now that we are doing it twice a month, you wouldn't forget too much of what we studied before. So we will get into our review immediately. The first thing you remember is Daniel chapter 7. We talk about the first year of Belshazzar was the king of Babylon. That is when that chapter was written. And then in Daniel chapter 8 was written in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. And this will be the first one. The chapter 7 was written in 556 BCE, and chapter 8 was written in 553 BC. Is the third year of the reign of Belshazzar. A lot of stuff was happening around this time. And for example, the Jews, 90%, maybe 95% of the Jews was in exile in Babylon. And the 5% or 10% that was in Jerusalem were the poorest of the poor people. You'll also remember that Jeremiah the prophet, he was given a choice by Nebuchadnezzar. He said, do you want to come with us to Babylon? We will treat you like a king. We give you an apartment by the river Euphrates. We will give you a flat screen TV, and we will set you up for life. Jeremiah said, no, I will stay with the poor people that is living in Jerusalem. So at the time when Daniel was writing Daniel chapter 8, Jeremiah was alive. Jeremiah was living in Jerusalem with the poorest of the poor people. What was happening in Jerusalem at that time? You remember the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BCE. The Jerusalem itself was destroyed. The walls around Jerusalem was destroyed. So all these things was existing at the time that Daniel was writing Daniel chapter 8. You remember that Ezekiel was taken into captivity. Ezekiel was living in Babylon at that time among the exiles. So God had a man in Jerusalem, and God had a man among the exile, and God had Daniel in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. All of this was happening at the time when Daniel was writing Daniel chapter 8 in the third year of Belshazzar. Now, you remember in Daniel chapter 2, this was the vision that Nebuchadnezzar saw. And he threatened the wise men and stuff and said, if you don't tell me what I dreamt and the meaning of what I dreamt, I'm going to cut your head off. I'm going to make your house a dunghill. So this was the vision that, or the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. And the head of the statue was made of gold. And we have the chest and the arms was made of silver. The belly and the thighs were made of brass. The legs were made of iron. And the feet was made of iron and clay. So we were never given the name of any of these. We said these symbols, the head of gold, silver, brass, iron, and clay, represents different kingdoms. We were not given the name of any other kingdom except the first one. Daniel said to Nebuchadnezzar, thou art the head of gold, you are the king of kings. And this is how we know that the head of gold represents the Babylonian kingdom. It also represents Nebuchadnezzar. Now today, we will be studying this part of the statue. This is what we will be dealing with today from Daniel chapter 2. Now, we also had another vision. In fact, Daniel, his vision in chapter 8, in chapter 7, and we saw the head of gold being Nebuchadnezzar, and then we saw the lion with wings that represents Babylon also. So these two creatures, these two items or symbols represents the kingdom of Babylon and the king of Babylon. And then we have the third one was blank. This is chapter 8. We didn't receive any information on the first kingdom, the head of gold or the lion with the wings. Chapter 8, that was void, because the Babylonian kingdom was on the way down. It was in decline. So Daniel chapter 8 started off with the second kingdom. So we talked about that last week. We talked about the chest and the arms of silver. And then we talk about the bear, the lopsided bear, one side being higher than the other side with 3 ribs in his mouth. That was Daniel chapter 7. It represents the second kingdom. And then we saw the ram with the 2 horns. One horn was higher than the other one. That is chapter 8. And it represents the same kingdom, which is the second kingdom. And the 2 horns represent the kings of the Medes and the Persians. So this is what we did up to this point. And then we went out on a little tangent where we were studying the Medes. They said, Daniel said the Medes and the Persians. The 2 horns represents the Medes and the Persians. The Medes were here before the Persians, because the higher horn came up last. So we took a look at the Medes, how they established their kingdom, and we start off with Cyaxares. We said he was the 3rd king. His grandfather Diocles was the 1st king of the Medes. And then we came to Astyages, who was the son of Cyaxares. So we continue our study with this. Cyaxares was the last king of the Medes. He had a daughter named Mandani, and he had a dream that she was with child. She was pregnant, and vines grew out of her stomach and covered the whole area, or the whole earth as he knew it. And when he called the wise men to ask them, what does this dream mean? He said, your daughter is going to have a son and he's going to rule the world. So Astyages, he didn't like that. He didn't want that guy around. So what he did was he married her to a very unassuming king. His name was Cambyses. He was the king of Anshan. And Anshan was a parish or a province of Persia, which was ruled by Astyages. So the Medes were controlling the Persians at that time. And Cambyses was a very quiet-spoken, unassuming guy. So he said no good thing could come out of that marriage. So he married his daughter to Cambyses. However, the son that came out of that marriage was Cyrus the Great. And he was the one who later on had a battle with his grandfather Astyages, the king of the Medes. So now we have the Persians fighting against the Medes, and Cyrus won that battle. So he merged the 2 nations together, and this is how we ended up with the Medes and the Persians. So I showed you from the vision that Daniel had, the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had from the second kingdom in chapter 2, chapter 7, and chapter 8. And this is how we ended up with the Medes and the Persians. So the first king of the Medes and the Persians, the united nation of the Medes and the Persians, was Cyrus the Great. We went through a couple of scriptures where we saw that God said Cyrus was his shepherd. Cyrus was his anointed one. Cyrus was a Messiah for the Jewish people. And God said that he held Cyrus' right hand and subdued the kings that were before him, and so on. So we will be seeing more stories about Cyrus as we continue in our study. In fact, if we would have finished this chapter tonight, we will see Cyrus again next week. So we will get back into more detail with Cyrus. But he was the first king of the Medes and the Persians, and he merged the two countries together, and he did a lot of amazing things. Now the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians was from the year 550 BCE to 330 BCE. That is a period of 220 years. So although Cyrus died, the kingdom still continued for 220 years. The Babylonian kingdom continued only for 87 years. So let's go on. Now, this is important. Now, although I teach a class or I teach a chapter, I still continue studying or trying to learn more things about that particular chapter. So you remember we talk about this verse, behold another beast, second was like a bear, and it was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in the mouth. This I want you to pay attention to this. This matches with Daniel chapter 8 verse 4. And I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward. So I am saying that the 3 ribs represents the 3 directions in which Cyrus or the Medes and the Persians were pushing or trying to conquer. And what I observed was the last king of the Medes and Persians, or even Cyrus himself, when he pushed eastward. Now notice the boundaries God set for him: westward, northward, and southward. That is the boundaries that God set for the Medes and the Persians. And let's say he said this for Cyrus also. But the minute Cyrus went towards the east, he was killed. And he was killed in a very unassuming battle. He was killed by the queen of a nomadic tribe. A very insignificant battle. He conquered the world at that time, but he was killed the minute he came out of God's boundary. And then he died in the year 530, and he was buried in Pasagande. This is in Iran, and his tomb is still there today. Okay, now I told you between Daniel chapter 8 verse 4 and Daniel chapter 8 verse 5 is a period of 220 years. A lot of stuff happened during that 220 years. The Jews, they went back to Jerusalem during that 220 years. The temple foundation was laid within that 220 years. The temple was built within that 220 years. Jerusalem, the walls were built back within that 220 years. So a lot of stuff happened during that 220 years. Also, there was a number of kings. Cyrus was the first king of the Medes and the Persians. But then you had Cambyses II. That was Cyrus' son. Then you had Smerdis. That was imposter posing as Cyrus' second son. Then you had Darius, first, second, and third. So in Daniel chapter 8 verse 5, Daniel said, and this is where our lesson starts today, as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So now we are entering the phase where the Medes and the Persian Empire is coming to a close, and now we have the third, and it is important that you understand this. We are talking about the third world empire, and we are talking about a different set of people. Now in the first, the Medes and the Persians, he had a ram with 2 horns. In this chapter 5, he has a he-goat with 1 horn between his eyes. And the fact that he covered the whole earth, meaning he had a big army, and he did not touch the ground means that he was moving real fast. And it's funny that every time I read this verse of scripture, I remember Pastor Soja Morgesa. I don't know how many of you would remember him, but he had a Datsun 1200, and everybody used to drive that car to bring people to church. And his theory was, we had a lot of potholes in the village. If you drive fast enough, the car will go over the potholes. And I would never forget that. But this is what is happening here. This he-goat was moving so fast that he did not touch the earth. So there's a number of things we learn about this third kingdom. It is represented, or the symbol used to represent it is a he-goat. Secondly, he came from the west. Thirdly, he covered the whole earth. Fourthly, he did it very quickly. He did not touch the ground. And the he-goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Now, this is a map that I've been using for a while, and the west will be from Greece. This is the western area. Remember when I think it was the king of Persia went to the westward? He went right at this point here, which is Thrace, Lydia, and Sardis, the capital. But Greece is a little more to the back. We have Macedonia. We have, let me see if I could blow this up for you. Okay, we have Macedonia, we have Thrace, we have Marathon, we have Athens, we will have Greece. This is the area that this he-goat is coming from. Okay, so that's the area he's coming from, and this is what the he-goat would look like. He had one horn between his eyes, and his feet was not touching the ground. The rough goat, and I love it when God give us the answer to the puzzle. The rough goat is the king of Grecia. Or you could say the rough goat is the king of Greece. Or the rough goat is the king of the Greco-Macedonian Empire. Any one of those will be right. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So the goat itself is Grecia or Greece or Greco-Macedonian Empire, and the great horn is the first king. So we're going to take this piece by piece. The goat itself is the king of Greece or Grecia or Greco-Macedonian kingdom. The great horn is the first king. And you'll find this in Daniel chapter 8, verse 21. I love it when God does this, because you will notice he told us the two horns represents the king of the Medes and the Persians. He told us this great horn is the first king, and the goat represents Greece. Now, the first one, he did not explicitly tell us that it was Babylon, except in Daniel chapter 2, the head of gold is the king of Babylon. It is Nebuchadnezzar. And if you were to go on YouTube, you will see, and you look at 10 different videos on the book of Daniel, they will give you 10 different answers to explain to you what is the first beast. But in our Bible study, we know that the head of gold was the king of the king of Babylon. It is Nebuchadnezzar, and it is Babylon. So the lion with the wings is Babylon, and then the second kingdom is the Medes and Persia, and now we are dealing today with the king of Grecia, because the Bible says in Daniel chapter 8, verse 21, the he-goat is the king of Greece. Let's go on. So this is what we did so far. We did this part of the statue, which is the belly and thighs of brass, which is the king of the Greco-Macedonian Empire. We did the he-goat with the horn between his eyes. This is the same thing, the Greco-Macedonian Empire. And then in Daniel chapter 7, we had the leopard with the four heads and the four wings, which is also the Greco-Macedonian Empire. So these three symbols represents the same thing. Let's go on. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing by the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. So now we have a goat fight. We have the ram with the two horn, and we have the he-goat with the single horn. Now, the fact that they talk about the ram with the two horns, I think that's a ram sheep. And I would believe that the he-goat is a ram goat, okay, or a he-goat. And the he-goat came towards the ram with the two horns, and he ran with him very angrily. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hands. So now we have a goat fight. And by the way, I believe the reason why God used a ram and a he-goat to explain these two kingdoms is because the Medes and the Persians, they came from the mountains, and the mountain people understand what is a ram and what is a he-goat. So we have a goat fight taking place here. The goat with one horn, the he-goat with one horn, come against the ram with two horns. And the ram with the two horns was not able to stand up against the he-goat with the one horn. What I want you to pay attention to here is that the he-goat did not kill the ram. He stamped upon him, he cast him to the ground, but he did not kill the ram. Let's go on. Who is this ram with the two horns is the question. So this is what we got, a fight. The ram with the two horns was wounded, but he was not killed by the goat with the two horns, or the he-goat with the two horns. Now, this was taking place at the end of the 220-year reign of the Medes and the Persians. So I told you before that Cyrus was the first king of the Medes and the Persians. Then you have Cambyses II, and then you have Smerdis, and then you have Darius the first, second, and third, and you had kings in between. And the last king of the Medes and the Persians was a guy by the name of Darius III. So the battle between the he-goat and the ram with the two horns is the last king of the Medes and the Persians, Darius III. He was born in the year 380, and his reign ended at 330. This was the end of the Medes and the Persian Empire. So let us see what we can learn about this king. First of all, he was in charge of the royal postal service before he became king. The two previous kings were poisoned by the court eunuch by the name of Bagohaz. Bagohaz was, I think he was a cupbearer, and he was the one to give the king his wine, and he poisoned the two previous kings. So when Darius became king, I guess he wanted to make a toast to the king, so he bought him a cup of wine. Instead of Darius drink the wine, he made Bagohaz drink the wine that he bought for the king. And Bagohaz was dead because it was poison. Darius III fought the last Persian war. There was at least two Persian wars against Alexander the Great or against the Greeks. Two Persian wars. Darius was killed by a guy named Bessus, a satrap of Bactria. A satrap is somebody like a governor. So remember, the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians were very big, and one king was unable to control all of that. So he had governors or satraps. It's about the same. It means about the same thing, where you have a person ruling in a little area. And this guy Bessus, he killed Cyrus the Great. So it wasn't the he goat with the one horn that killed Darius. It was his own noble governor. So this is what we have. We have the he goat, who is the king, and then we have the horn, which is the first. The he goat, which is the king of the Greeks, and then we have the horn, which is the first king. So we are going to take a look at who this first king is. So by this time, Darius will be killed. The Medes and the Persians will be, their kingdom will be done away with. Remember also that when a kingdom loses its power or its dominion, it still retains its life and it continue living, but under the new rulership. That is important. So therefore the he goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. So this he goat had one horn, and he just destroyed the king of the Medes and the Persians. Then he became very great, and when he became great, that horn was broken. So who was that horn? Who was the first king of the Greco-Roman Macedonian Empire? We will start off with a guy by the name of Philip II. He was the king of Macedon. He died in the year 336. He had a son, and his son was Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great started to rule in 335 BCE until 323 BCE. He died at the age of 32. Now, you would find, if you were to do any research on Alexander the Great, you will find a lot of people, and you will see one of my slides say he was 33 years old. And the reason why they would say he was 33 years old was when his father Philip, and let me get my marker here, give me a second. When this Philip II was the father of Alexander the Great, and when he died in 336. So Alexander the Great took over the kingdom in 336. I am saying that he started to rule in 335. And the reason for that is, if Philip II started to reign in 336, regardless of when he died during that year, this entire year will go towards Philip II. So in my opinion, Alexander started to reign in 335. But anyway, you see, they say Alexander the Great was 33 years old, is because they counted it from 336. I am not doing that. So this is why I am saying he's 32 years old. So the horn on the he goat is a guy by the name of Alexander the Great. And this is history we are talking about now. So let's see what we can learn about Alexander the Great. Between the age of 13 through 16, he was taught by Aristotle, who was a Greek philosopher, the Aristotle, who was one of the greatest philosophers. Before the age of 13, they say he was taught by a guy by the name of Leonidas. I do not know if that's the same Leonidas from Sparta, but he was taught by Leonidas, and then for 2 to 3 years he was taught by Aristotle. Then at the age of 18, he was only 18 years old when he won his first battle. He fought against the secret band of Thebes, and he was only 18 years old, and he won that battle, helping his father. And then at the age of 20, he became the king of Macedon when his father died in 336. And then at the age of 32, he died in Babylon. He did not name his successor. So this is the short life of Alexander the Great. Remember, it says that the goat was moving so fast that his foot was not touching the ground. So we are talking about the little horn. The little horn was the first king of the Greco-Macedonian Empire, and it was Alexander the Great. He died at the age of 32. He did not leave a successor. Let's go on. Now, I saw this slide, and I think it was very informative, so I can share this with you. The Battle of Thebes, this piece here, 336 was around this, close to the time his father died, or a year before his father died. This was the first Persian War, and Alexander the Great won that war. He was about maybe 20 years old. He defeated Egypt, and he became the Pharaoh of Egypt. Now, remember I told you that Pharaoh is a title, and Alexander was the Pharaoh of Egypt in the year 332. And then he defeated the Persian again. This is the second Persian War. And they say the king fled and was killed by one of his nobles. Remember, I just told you he was killed by Bessus, the satrap from Bactria. So Darius was killed by his own men. And then in 327, Alexander the Great crossed the Indus River, and he was pushing deeper into India, but his soldiers refused to fight. They wanted to go back home. And this is as far as Alexander the Great reached. He was in India by the year 327. His soldiers have been away from home for over 10 years. They were homesick. They wanted to go home. They said, no, we are not going to fight no more. Take us home. We want to go home. On his way home in 323, he visited Babylon. He became sick and died. And he was buried in a golden coffin. And you see this slide say he was 33 years old. I explained to you why they say 33 and I say 32. But this is the short life of Alexander the Great. Just give me 1 second here. How did I get here? All right, 1 second. Okay. So this is the short life of Alexander the Great. And let's go on. Therefore, the he-goat waxed very great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. They are talking about Alexander. Alexander controlled the whole of the then known world at that time, all the way up to India, and he was very, very strong. When he was strong, the horn was broken. This is when Alexander died at the age of 32. If you were to read some history books about Alexander, some of them say he died from syphilis, some say he was an alcoholic, some say he had the fever. Whatever way he died at the age of 32. And for it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. So the great horn on that he-goat was broken when the goat became very strong. And 4 horns grew up in his place. Now, you'll notice I have a red marker here. And between these 2 sentences or statements is 15 years. Now, I thought when I first read this that Alexander was on his dying bed, and I thought that they asked him, well, who should control the kingdom? And he said, okay, give it to these 4 people. It was not like that. It took 15 years before the 4 notable horns came up. And you notice 1 horn was broken. Okay, the great horn was broken. This goat had 1 horn. The 1 horn was broken. and four notable ones came out of that one horn towards the four winds of heaven. So this is what we get. The goat had a notable horn between his eyes. The great horn between his eyes was the first king, that's Alexander the Great. The great horn was broken, and four notable ones came up towards the four winds of heaven. This is a goat with four horns. So I guess it's something like that. We also have, now this is where this picture comes in. Remember Daniel chapter 7. The third kingdom is represented by a leopard, which represents speed. And the leopard had four wings of a fowl on his back and four heads. So when that horn was broken, four horns came up. That is why God used this picture or this image to explain to you the four horns of Alexander the Great, or the four horns that came up. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and there came up four notable ones. Now look at this verse, Daniel chapter 8, verse 22. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. This is important. The four horns that came up after the great horn was broken, according to the Bible, according to Daniel chapter 8, verse 22, are four kingdoms. Okay, so in this chapter, we had a lot of horns. We had first the ram with two horns, that represents two kingdoms, the Medes and the Persians. Then we have the ram with the he-goat with one horn, that represents the first king of the third kingdom. And then that horn was broken. Now we have four kingdoms coming up. So let's see who these four kingdoms are. We have, remember I told you, from the time the horn was broken to the time that these four kingdoms came up, took 15 years. Why would it take 15 years? For one, Alexander the Great had a smaller brother. His name was Philip III. He had the right to the kingdom. Alexander's wife, Roxana, she was pregnant with child. They had to wait and see if she was having a male or female child and how that child is going to grow up. And then there was infighting between the four generals. All of that took place when the dust was settled. The kingdom was divided into four parts. We have Cassander, that is one general. We have Lysimachus or Antigonus. We had Ptolemy, and we have Seleucus. These are the four generals, and the kingdom was divided. Cassander got Macedonia and Greece. Lysimachus got Thrace and Asia Minor. Ptolemy got Egypt, and this is important. He got Egypt and Syria. This is went to Seleucus. He got Syria, and this is how the kingdom was broken up. From Syria all the way up to India, Seleucus. This is the two that we will be paying attention to as we get more into our study. So this is the four horns that came up after Alexander the Great died. And they are four generals that would lead four kingdoms. And this is how the kingdom was divided up. The part in yellow is Seleucus. Ptolemy is Egypt and Cyrene and so forth. Jerusalem, Israel, and so on. Antigonus or Lysimachus is the same person. And he got this area here, which is about Thrace. And Cassander, he got Macedonia and Greece. So the kingdom was divided into four parts. So to make it very simple, we had the he-goat with one horn. The one horn represents Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great died. We had four kingdoms. And now we are going to get another breakup. But before we do that, all right. Daniel chapter 8, verse 8, the he goat waxed very great, and for it came up four notable ones towards the four winds. I left out some words in this. I just want you to understand that the four notable horns came up from the he goat. This is the third kingdom. Okay, remember we are talking about the third kingdom, Daniel chapter 8. Four notable horns came up from the he goat. And out of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land. So the pleasant land is always Israel. And I try to go very slow that you will understand this. The he goat was very great, and when the he goat became very great, the horn was broken. Four notable ones came up towards the four winds, and out of those four horns came up one little horn. And it is so important that we pay attention to this. This little horn is different from the first horn that we saw in Daniel chapter 7. Remember Daniel chapter 7? I will show you a slide on that just now. So we are talking about two little horns. And this little horn came up from the third kingdom, which is the Greco-Macedonian kingdom. It came out from one of the four notable horns, or the four kingdoms. When Alexander died, those four kingdoms came up. This little horn came up from that kingdom. That is important. Let's go on. So this is what I'm saying all the time. The he goat, he had one horn. This horn. When this horn was broken, four horns came up. We have Seleucus, we have Ptolemy, we have Lysimachus, and we have Cassander. The four horns came up from this one horn. And out of that horn, which is Seleucus, this one here, came up the little horn. This is where the little horn came up from. And this little horn, you see the little horn came up here. This is important that you understand that this horn came up from the third kingdom. That is important. Let's go on. Now, look at Daniel chapter 7. Behold, a fourth beast. This is Daniel chapter 7 we are talking about. Dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. And it had 10 horns. So in chapter 7, the one that we did a couple of weeks ago, the fourth beast had 10 horns. Pay attention. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. This is a totally different horn. This horn came up from the fourth beast. The horn that we are talking about in chapter 8 came up from the third beast. And behold, in this horn were eyes, like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And this little horn, when he came up, the first thing he did was uproot 3 of these 10 horns. What I am trying to show you here is that it is two different horns. And as we go into continuing our study, it is important that you understand the two different horns. This chapter 7, this horn came up from the 10 horns in the fourth beast. And the one that we did before in chapter 8 came up from the third kingdom. Pay attention to that. Who is this little horn? His name is Antiochus IV. Now, most of the people on YouTube say Antiochus. We in Trinidad say Antiochus IV. Antiochus IV Epiphanes. The word Epiphanes means illustrious one or God manifest. He was a Greek king of this Seleucid Empire, and he reigned over Syria between the years 175 and 164 BCE. So this little horn is a guy by the name of Antiochus or Antiochus Epiphanes the Fourth. He was the king, a Greek king of the Seleucid Empire, and he ruled over Syria. This is important to remember. We are talking about the little horn. Let's continue. And it waxed great, even unto the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars. We are talking about the little horn now. The little horn waxed great, even to the host of heaven. Now, when they say the host of heaven, they are not talking about the heavenlies, they are talking about the Jewish people. And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and trample upon them. This is a man who was a human being, who was a king, the king of Syria, a Greek king. So there's no way he could get to heaven to cast down the host of heaven. It is talking about the Jewish people. Let's go on. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. By him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So now Daniel shifts his attention to the little horn. He's no longer talking about the Greco-Macedonian Empire. He introduced that to us. He's no longer talking about the great horn that was between the eyes of the he-goat. He's not talking about that no more. He's not talking about the four kingdoms or the four generals that took over the kingdom after Alexander died. He's talking about the little horn that came out of the Seleucid Empire, and we said his name is Antiochus Epiphanes. So we are talking about Antiochus Epiphanes right now. He magnified himself even to the prince of the host. We are talking about the Jewish people. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So the question is, what is the daily sacrifice? Let us take a look at the daily sacrifice. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. And immediately you will see two lambs on this page. So what is the daily sacrifice? Exodus chapter 29, verse 38 and 39. Now this is that which thou shalt offer upon the altar: 2 lambs of the year, day by day continuously. 1 lamb thou shalt offer in the morning, and another lamb thou shalt offer at evening. So we are talking about the daily sacrifice that was taken away by Antiochus Epiphanes from the Jewish people in Jerusalem. This is what we are talking about. But you remember, at the beginning of the class, I told you that the temple of Jerusalem was destroyed, that the city of Jerusalem was destroyed, that the walls of Jerusalem was destroyed. But now we are seeing that the daily sacrifice was taken away. This means during that time, and remember I told you Cyrus was the one who sent the Jewish people back to Jerusalem. Cyrus was the one who cast the foundation for the temple. So by the time this little horn comes around, it will be way down in history, and the temple will be rebuilt. The daily sacrifice will be offered on a daily basis, and then this guy comes along and he will cause the daily sacrifice to cease. So we are talking about what is the daily sacrifice. The daily sacrifice is when the Jewish people, or God requires this, that you shall offer 1 lamb in the morning and 1 lamb in the evening. The lamb have to be 1 year old, and you will offer this lamb continuously, day after day after day, after week, after month, after year, after generations. This is what God put upon the Jewish people, regardless of what the weather is like, regardless of what you have to do that day. You have to offer one lamb in the morning and one lamb in the evening. Let's go on. The daily sacrifice is what we are talking about. And with the one lamb, a tenth deal of flour mingled with a fourth part of an hin of beaten oil. The beaten oil will be extra virgin olive oil, and a tenth deal of flour mingled with a fourth part of beaten oil or extra virgin olive oil. How do they call that when you combine it together? They call that the morning sacrifice with a meal offering and with a drink offering. Every single day, and on the Sabbath, you do it twice in the morning and twice in the evening. And if you have the Feast of Tabernacle, the Passover, or whatever other feast you have, you still have to offer one lamb in the morning with a deal of flour, a tenth deal of flour, and a hin of beaten oil, a fourth part of beaten oil. That's the daily sacrifice in the morning, and then you repeat that in the evening. Now the question is, what time is the morning sacrifice? What time is the evening sacrifice? We are talking about the daily sacrifice. And another lamb thou shalt offer at evening, and shall do thereto according to the meat offering of the morning. So you repeat what was done in the morning, according to the drink offering thereof, for a sweet savor, an offering made by fire unto the Lord. So the daily sacrifice is a lamb in the morning, 1 year old, perfect lamb, no handicap in that lamb. It have to be a perfect lamb with a mixture of flour and oil and wine as a meal or a meat offering, a meal offering, and a drink offering in the morning, a drink offering in the evening. We still have to talk about what time you will do this. This shall be a continual burnt offering throughout your generation at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord. So I don't know if you remember when we were doing the book of Revelation, there was an altar on the side of the tabernacle. This is where they would offer this lamb every single morning and every single evening. You would have to offer that. So what time is that offering? Now, by the way, this is called in Hebrew tamid, T-A-M-I-D or T-A-M-Y-D. Is a continuous offering every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year throughout your life, throughout your generations. What time is the morning sacrifice? The morning sacrifice is at 9 o'clock. Remember, Peter went to pray at 9 o'clock in the temple. That is at 9 o'clock. And the evening sacrifice is at 3 in the afternoon. Now look at this. This is important. Mark said, Mark 15:25, it was the third hour and they crucified him. Jesus died at the third hour. What time is the third hour? The third hour is 9 o'clock in the morning when the first sacrifice or the morning sacrifice was offered. How does Mark know that? Did you know Mark was there at the crucifixion of Jesus? That's how he know that. And it was the third hour that Jesus was crucified. At the third hour. The exact time when the morning sacrifice is supposed to be offered. Now look at this. And when the sixth hour was come, there was darkness over the whole land until the ninth hour. What happens at the sixth hour? At this time is when they would tie the second lamb at the altar before it is killed. They would have it tied close to the altar at the sixth hour. At the sixth hour, when Jesus was on the cross, darkness was upon the whole earth or the whole land. And then it was about the ninth hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. the ninth hour. This is the time that the second daily sacrifice is offered. What am I telling you? Jesus Christ is our daily sacrifice. It starts at the third hour, which is 9 o'clock in the morning, when the first sacrifice is offered, and he died when the third sacrifice was offered. He was on the cross from the third hour to the ninth hour. He gave up the ghost. So Jesus Christ is our tamid. Jesus Christ is our daily sacrifice. And this is the point where I would stop. And next day we will finish this chapter and we will be going on to chapter 5. We will be going back to chapter 5. So, Pastor Michael, thank you very much. I turn this over to you at this time.